теперь. Good evening again. I would like first of all to talk about our experiment on content caching, and also about a few things that would allow you or might allow you if you improve them, if you improve the quality of them, of internet services provided from the point of view of user. From a user point of view, the most important issue is that there is a need for cooperation on all the levels, from content suppliers and down to the end user. What does the user want from the internet? It wants fast opening sites. It wants toys to scoot and streak their heroes not to freeze on the flight. They don't want the sun to freeze. They want glitches. They want everything cute, fast, and they don't want to get themselves a coffee or tea or just drumming on a keypad as soon as the page is loading, as long as the page is loading, and they want all things together in a bunch. So what are the problems? What are the problems that get in our way of doing so? First of all, from the point of view of user, the internet is some sort of cloud that you send your packages and get packages from, that get back with ready-made content. But really, it's not a cloud. These are just nodes, somehow interconnected. And as the picture shows, when points A and B communicate, and when C and D communicate, that seems to be like they're no way related, and that they may cause an overload in one of the interim channels. But the users don't know about this. But they don't know about it because there is no way to know beforehand that this particular direction is overloaded, overstressed. But another point to make is that for different traffics, we got different requirements for different traffics. Like voice DNS should pass in a jiffy, in no time, in shortcuts, without losses, without delays. And what are the queries? That's less critical. Torrents may actually use very bad quality channels and not feel any discomfort from it. But there is no handy way, no comfortable way to divide all the available torrent by other available stream by service, other current by service. You may divide it by portal. That doesn't work for all. In some protocols, there's the normal thing is to get to the fourth level and even further. But if they are encrypted and protected by encryption, that remains unresolved. Now, what else gets in the way of our living is actually overloads on the network, temporary, that we can't control, and that's losses of packages and important of bundles and important traffic. And also it's just to mention that many content providers somehow, for no reason, they block the caching of contents, and maybe at first as static, like user pictures and background or site designs, which will cause, if you reload the page, might pose some swapping, and that does not add much to the comfortable use, and also DNS queries also pertain to that thing. Because if the DNS server is pretty slow or far away, then every address, every request for an extra page, there's a turnover of DNS, and we're waiting. We don't know why and what for. And there's about 100 objects on a modern website. So then even if there's a ping like 10 milliseconds, a page loads like 1 second or 2 seconds, or maybe in 3 seconds, only because the queries are executed in a sequence. And of course, you should not forget about the fact that we still have GPRS and ADSL internet that's pretty slow. Though in the cities and in an urban area, we're used to have a high speed, but that's not always true. And now let's get into details a little bit, and that's about channel load control throughout the way from client to supplier. And it would be pretty nice if to create a protocol and execute it that would tell all the links of the chain that somewhere down the way there's an overloaded channel. And because as practice shows, it's like if we know beforehand that this particular direction is overloaded, and if we put off the data stream in our buffer, if we hold it in our buffer, we will not get such a catastrophic percentage of losses of bundles that may visually be noticed by the user. But yes, there will be slower loading and there will be an upping of pings, but on the whole, you may make good use of the service, which will not annoy you. And now about our second experiment, and that about the caching. It was also noticed that despite the fact that the pictures are static, they keep loading anew and new over and over again. And there was a proxy that was set up, that caches everything by force. By force, the lifetime on an object is established, and by force, it blocks reloading, and it turned out to be that for some sites, especially Google in particular, you need to block the caching directive about the fact that's private data. Otherwise, there are no objects even in the cache browser. So now just to speak again about the data differentiation complexity. We had to make up its own rules for every site by which to divide the cacheable content. And there is no scheduled way or no standard way of doing so when the sites are not posting any information about that and not cluing us in, and that would be just as handy like Contact is doing. It's dividing and sprawling cacheable, non-cacheable, private dynamic data over to different servers with different IPs and different names, and that's making our job easier. Well, then again, this information is now public, and if you talk about Contact, then without further settings, without further caching, the data will be swapped every time anew. And another interesting point is the way CDN is structured, and there's pretty often that there are links to the same object when reloading, and there are different hyperlinks, and then can take you to another site, or they can take you to the same site with different parameters, and again they will not get into cache. And then the same commercial, the same picture. Despite that, and here are the comparison results. In black is the number of queries or requests that we managed to take out of cache only because of pasting the object names. Went from an URL, and there's a unique identifier singled out, and according to it, the data to that identifier, the data is taken from the cache, and then the rest is just normal cache hits. And as far as we can see on heavy content, there's almost 90% of the data that is taken from the caches, just because exclusively because of the unique identifier. And on YouTube, that's about 50%, and there's about the same because of the regular cache hits. And just to be honest, I don't know what it stands for because I don't really use Contactia. That's just from our office, and throughout all the rest, we can also see that the pasting of URLs is now less efficient. This is the data from on other sources, and here you can see a comparison how much we win on volume of data due to forced caching, and how much we're winning on hits, because every hit that we have given away from the cache is minus 20 or 30 milliseconds of page loading. And in red down there, there's original results that we get unless there is no special directive that we use. As far as we can see, Google has more or less smooth things, and we don't have a large increment. But talking about other content providers, there is a pretty sensible growth. I'm now talking about the economic feasibility of this economy. If we look into our traffic, then it will look like 10 to 30% now will be, and out of them for the 10% for HTTP, and out of them only 10% for little objects, and that's percentage units. And talking about volume saving, economizing on volume, it doesn't make sense to save something really, but it doesn't. But it makes sense if we want to accelerate the page loading, and we don't want to prevent the user from feeling discomfortable. It makes sense, yes. Or we could potentially increase the maximum size of the object on the cache. Then there's good caching of YouTube commercials and MP3s and all the rest, and then we'll get the same percentage of economy, but that's already for all HTTP, and it does not include, and it's clear, HD quality films, but I'm talking about the rest, you may make the user's life easier, much easier, and that's from the point of view of the DSP, and also from the point of view of the user who can use local proxy. And talking about content providers, I think that's quite an excuse to give yourself a thought, because by blocking the caching of your traffic, there's an overload of the band, of their own band. In that case, so the question is, does it make sense to get an extra server installed elsewhere? If we can potentially optimize the content giveaway. This is well already discussed, and probably getting back to the topic of optimization. Globally speaking, what will be good to be done in cooperation between everyone, from supplier through transport operators, through and ISPs, and down to the user. So classically, if there is not enough channel, it's expanded. The only downside is that we can expand our own channel, not uplink channel, not content provider channel. Peering is actually basically the same. We can peer up with a content provider and with another different network, but it might also seem to be there is some bottleneck up ahead, and that we're unable to cope with. And caching of content is also a standard solution, but as this research has shown, it doesn't work in standard configuration. And Jumbo frame is a wonderful thing, but so far the majority of the users are on 10 megabit ports or on DSL and GPRS. So it doesn't provide a big win from that. So otherwise, we will have to reassemble the bundles, which is an extra cost. And operators normally don't do it. And it's understood that caching DNS on the level of DSP also makes the life of clients easier. So what can be basically done to get more comfortable internet usage? We can divide the traffic by services, and we can get a special band for the critical ones and not for non-critical. We can balance the channels, and that will be another good solution. Would be using your own internal network for your traffic, and that's internal resources, and that's retracking on the torrents. And also another example of shaper settings that will allow you to have a doubly overloaded channel, and so you can use it and not feel discomfort of using it. So at the outgoing channel, the settings are these. And this is the incoming inbound channel, a little bit different from here, because there we will also divide answers from responses from suppliers of heavy content like video servers. What this thing is missing is it's missing, as I've already said, interaction between all the transmission nodes. Now, if I, as an ISP, could tell somebody, you know, my channel is overloaded, and don't send any traffic to me anymore, and they pass it up to the networks up the chain, then we would first of all get rid of classic DDoSes. And secondly, the overall use of the internet would be more comfortable. And as far as I know, there is no protocol like that so far. There is only, as we said, other previous speakers said, there are things that allow you to do it inside one operator's network. And when it comes to inter-operator interaction, there is none like that to do this thing. As I was already said, it would be pretty good to have a public list, a publicly available list of IP addresses and ports down which you could, by which you could classify the traffic. And we're not having anything like that yet. And in the same way, there might be a traffic division by cacheability, dynamicity, and so on. It will also be nice to have a technology to bundle up the packages and bundle up the bundles in jumbo frames on the level of switches. And perhaps it makes sense to delve part of the work or delegate part of the work on content distribution to some point-to-point networks like torrents or something else, which again would allow you to close part of the traffic on local providers, some part inside the main operator, and perhaps that could be like a standalone business for big transport operators, and that's the storage of data on the way, transmittable data on the way. And what we don't have is a ready-made software that you can install on your working computer and get all the pleasantries of caching just out of the box, like you could potentially assemble and set, but that's a turnkey solution. That might be but now who needs that? ISP that's to be left by the users. Transport operators would perhaps need some additional services to make money on. So it's not just abstract internet, but it's internet for voice, internet for video, and for something else. And content providers might substantially save on their channels. And also, we're going to get a more even distribution of loads throughout all the sites of this network, throughout all the stretches of the networks, and also get protected from DOS attacks. There's a question from me. Sergei Misalov, a TART group, and here's the question. You mentioned that you wanted a protocol that would allow you to control the network load. I just want to understand how is that possible? How to possibly efficiently work for the protocol, like efficient work with a protocol that will cover as a minimum 3 at the same time level of access mode between different autonomous systems at absolutely different ends of the internet while pretty safely and effectively controlling the load. I can't see such a solution so far, and I even presume that it's not even being made up by the engineering brains of the ones for whom it may concern. Primarily, there's pretty much of a hodgepodge of the levels and models of the network, and secondly, security, and thirdly, scalability. These are my complaints about such a protocol. That's what I want from that protocol. I got my own question and issues, but nevertheless, we don't have anything like that protocol, but it would be a pretty useful thing to have on the first level at least, so that an overloaded channel would place more traffic than it's able to hold. BGP black hole community. It's not the right thing to use. I not that I want to block it completely. I want to diminish it. That's the communication between you, and throughout that's the communication throughout the chain. I would not dare, like, if that's a protocol that would point to me how the traffic should run across my network, through my network, I would not trust that protocol. And that's another issue. Thanks. And then I will also say another question from our ARC, and it's you mentioned that up the chain of above providers, you should inform to them that no further traffic. How do you do that? Where will the traffic go? There are options. There are alternatives. If that's done to the end user, to the end client, that they will send less traffic. But if that's interim operator, that's an interim operator, and they decide that they got an opportunity to send it down another channel to another channel, they might make that solution. They might make that decision. That's to be adjustable. Can you hear me? I just want to make a little comment, and that's about the fact that the caching on the client side or closer to the client to access network operator would save 30 to 50% of the band. That's good from the point of view of operator and user, but from the point of view of CDN or an above operator that sell this traffic for money, it's no good. So talking about this 30 to 90% of the money, they're about to lose that money. So if now, in a magic way, by magic, they would allow caching the content to the very estimable people that you showed up on the slides. That's really banned by flags, by identifiers to make the URLs different. Somebody down this chain or up this chain will be deprived of their revenue, which is pretty bad for them. So for ourselves, as more like content consumers, we need to give it ourselves a careful thought and to explain to the content producers that's no way to make money on us. Something needs changed to that structure. Thanks. Grigory Sagian, Internet Society, Armenia. Could you please share what you are trying to prioritize? You're trying to prioritize the traffic, and you were mentioning some sort of protocol, some sort of big band, or lower band, or smaller band. How could you look at it from the point of view of this network neutrality? It's just to say that it looks like you're offering something that would break the underlying notion that network should be neutral towards the protocols that go down it. Unfortunately, maybe fortunately, we have reached the time that there are different protocols, therefore channel-related requirements that they produce are also different. Therefore, talking about network being neutral to them seems not quite correct. And again, I'm talking like the end user. Hi. First of all, thanks for the presentation. Secondly, you mentioned that by balancing the traffic and redistribution and blocking the traffic on the channels, on outgoing channels from the clients, we can somehow struggle the attacks on a refusal of service. First of all, talking about the attacks on refusal of service, that won't help because the shaping is no way the solution to this problem, because legitimate users will be shaped in exactly the same way, and anyway they will get non-working service. So, but the more substantial comment is that the owners of the resources, so we're just mentioning, do not rely on the fact that down the way, on their way, the content will be somehow else cached and stored and all of that, to say the least, is an unexpected thing for them. And there is a simple example. I've already said that by a popular method, which means acceleration of resource work, is the caching, the long-term caching DNS records by the provider, and that accelerates the sites that don't need speed, but in practice, for those for whom the speed is important, they slow that down. Because in one of the mechanisms for balancing the load between the production services, DNS routing that is cached by the providers, to say the least, inoptimally, and is given to the clients inoptimally, which leads to a higher load on one of the servers. And that's actually one of the examples. And I just want to make a point that content providers, for the time being, do not expect these methods on acceleration of their work, and they pretty much there are people that need high-speed internet, high-speed work of their resources, and they basically put in a lot of money to not make an issue of that speed, and therefore they don't expect somebody to help them without consulting them, without talking to them. That's exactly what I meant to say, maybe not pretty obviously, but it would be pretty nice if the whole chain communicates to each other. It would be good, but the point is that this sort of communication should be started before we take any technical measures. That was an experiment, and I just don't mean that we've taken that from, and we did that to the users, and we did that to anyone else. We just did an experiment to understand, does it make sense to do so? We found out that 70 to 90% of the traffic on the network is rubbish, and you need to do something about it. That's rubbish because that content is cached while everything performs just fine. The point is that on that content, for example, in the process of, According to the experiment, we haven't noticed the difference, but indeed there might have been some embedded advertising in that content. So what that generator is short of profit, and we can't really judge it right now. There are two alternatives. It's either us, it's either not we, it's either those who generate the content and those who use the content, which means access providers will talk to each other and produce a reasonable compromise. So at the end of the day, when all channels are overloaded and everyone is thinking about buying a piece of hardware for caching and saving dozens of thousands of dollars a month on channels, then after that the advertising will be cut out and the channels will come a cropper. That It's just to say that the optimization of channels should be started with BCP 38, but I can't see any movement around this. We sort of talked about it, and that's absolutely, And thank you. If you believe in quantum mechanics and things change depending on whether you look at them or not. So as an operator, I don't have the right to look at anything else except captions. And as an end user, I will ideologically do everything my best to make it impossible, like data ciphering or something else. And how about like business processes? If the operators know on top there what the people do in my office, then that's a money worth, and they will just sell this information. There is secured information that is not subject to divulgation. But again, who makes the decision on what sort of information can or versus cannot be cached? The internet is transparent. Another issue that content caching does not pose additional threat to security is just to tell you if the provider needs to see where a particular user is, they will do it with or without cache. But do you know that there might be channel plotted via ICMP? What if there's necessary useful data in pictures? For you, that's the same pictures like a Google logo, but I have important information in there. Well, the feeling is that I did so about a decade ago when the channels were smaller in size and they cost higher. And I think that the people will stop doing it little by little pretty soon. So if they wrote about a gigabit pipe to every user to create the value added for them, and then the operators will be damaged. So until torrents come a cropper, there's no problems. Well, when something drops, there's not enough channels, not enough throughputs, and if accept that if the content providers do not expect any increasing loads just because you're caching something, that will be one thing. But when something breaks down, and there will be a point in time when you have to give away loads of different contents not cached, they will get an overload of channels in their place, and they will not be ready for that in a way. And it doesn't matter where all things will be cached. It's important that the resource should be blocking the caching, because caching might also be available in the user's browser, but they will not be able to see the number of viewings. In this current situation, they don't know how much YouTube they're watching. Actually, YouTube, when being played, keeps knocking on the master side. Therefore, they will know what is being played. From the point of view of actually allocating money, and so on, the people might square up to a situation when when they are not braced up for everything. Otherwise, they got a permanent cash flow, and they now have $1 million here, they have $1 million there, and they have planned their budget, and they don't have any stress situation. They are not caught under stress. But what I want you to do, what I urge you to, is communicate, is mix together, all together. Between and among yourselves to eventually develop. That pertains to large market players. You need to force them to come to me, a little provider with 100 clients, and say, I want to have the cache of your YouTube closer to me. Could you please lend me some? It's not that lend you some, but rather say how to do it, what can be and what cannot be done. Except that there is questions about with right holders. They cached something that was blocked, that had been blocked by YouTube, and the users will keep watching that. In the same way, that could be stockpiled in the cache browser. That pertains to a particular user, and otherwise it looks like you are like into rogue activity, like like spreading pornography or terrorism. Извините, ребята, ну буквально секундочку внимания. Я не хочу никого призывать к такой дискуссии. Давайте немножко пойдем дальше. Давайте немножко сократим количество вопросов. Мы, наверное, я, кстати, рекомендую, давайте перенесем эту дискуссию или такие дискуссии к почте, к переписке, где вы сможете действительно ваше мнение выразить. Просто несколько вопросов еще, и все, дальше идем. I just want to make a little remark because everyone came up with different opinions, but it seems that one of the effective ways that could potentially be used and has the right to exist is monetization and introduction of premium traffic. For example, the hosting will trust the server 20% of premium traffic, and it will not be cut down up until the last point on a provider. And the same inter-provider thing, providers should trust each other and make money on trust. Yes. Thanks. Just a little remark. Maybe I was short of understanding, but I sort of fancied to yourself that you're dealing with a problem already resolved. There is CDNs, there is a public CDN, and there is in corporate CDNs like Contacti. In Yandex, there is a huge number of regional servers owned by large providers, and they allow you to really save the most expensive channels. If somebody like your site has a need to optimize traffic in between 2 points rather than running it from 1 point to all. That's implementable in the existing technologies. If there's a homepage of Mr. John's, Mr. X, you don't need to deal with their problem that they never had. I agree about Mr. Jones. Thanks. Последний вопрос, да, Дмитрий? Да, он как раз ушел. I will only say two things, I think. One is caching when changing the traffic that has a different name. It's called TPI. The packet inspection, when an operator assumes that they may look at the protocol and the bundle and the level of protocol and make a decision whether to issue the right traffic or not the right traffic that they're supposed to, because I know that many people don't like TPA. And about the other thing, about quotas on certain kinds of traffic, like on Skype and toys, that's 5%, which is very interesting, by the way, because Skype and toys are a category of its own. And that's what is called breaking the network neutrality. And the next thing I foresee down this way, if we go this way any longer, that means increasing the quota for the providers that will pay the operator and so on. So if somebody will get a lot of money from Yandex, you will see a wider band on the Yandex traffic, and the same pertains to Google. It's understood that it's either a different operator or a partner to a provider, so the user needs to exactly know what sort of internet they buy. So all the rest is just a cheating of users, and it's not internet providing, it's something else.